I was listening to Tony Schiavone's podcast. Well, a clip of it. I like Schiavone's podcast. Schiavone's podcast is right along with Bruce Pritchard's, where I will listen or watch the YouTube clips that are more dissected into more specific topics. Mostly because, as I've said before, I don't want to hear dirt. I don't want to hear, the seedy underbelly of wrestling. But I do want to hear fun stories and interesting stories like WWE purchasing WCW and how that came about and things like that. But so I'm listening to Tony Schiavone's, and Tony Schiavone is talking about David Arquette becoming WCW. And I know that kind of contradicts what I just said, that I don't want to know seedy underbelly. I don't want to know. But there are very few things. Like, I've been a wrestling fan since I was 8 years old. And I was probably smartened up, for lack of a better term, I don't know, like a few years later, maybe 3-4 years later, I was pretty smartened up to it. So from that point forward, from the age of like 12 or 13 on, there was very few things that really shocked me. Like anything was kind of possible. I was in that mindset, like knowing that it was scripted, that anything really was possible. So there was nothing that really surprised me. Hulk Hogan turning heel surprised me, or shocked me. Owen Hart's death shocked me, but that obviously was not a storyline. But there's very few things in wrestling that shocked me, and David Arquette becoming WCW World Champion shocked me. It was just so unforeseeable, unfathomable to me that David Arquette would become WCW World Champion. And I believe it was on Thunder. And so I watched Thunder religiously. I loved Thunder. I much preferred it to Nitro, actually. But I remember David Arquette becoming WCW World Champion, and just the shock. Like, really? David Arquette is WCW World Champion? Now, to double back and go back to Tony Schiavone was talking about how the backlash from fans saying, David Arquette, WCW World Champion? Like, no, how could you possibly make him World Champion? And Tony Schiavone likens it to them acting like it was an actual world championship, like it was an actual competitive world championship. And he went on and on. It's a work. It's a work. Get over it. It's a work. It's a work. Get over it. It's a work. And okay, I know I kind of branch off sometimes, and I'm going to branch off right now. Tony Schiavone, very knowledgeable, very educated man, but he almost comes across as the smarmy heel, and he's acting like himself. At least I think he's acting like himself. Hey, if he's not, he's working the hell out of me. But who was he talking about this past on one of the clips I was listening to? And he says to Conrad Thompson, who he does the podcast with, he says, well, should I badmouth him? And Conrad says, sure, go ahead. And Schiavone goes, he's not worth my time. So I don't know if that's a work. If it's a work, hey, he's working the hell out of me. Otherwise, he's a legit smarmy heel, and I could smack the spit out of him. Anyway, knowledgeable man. But he's talking about, get over it, it's a work. Get over it, it's a work. Get over it, it's a work. And then in the same breath, in almost the same literal gust of oxygen. He says, it's a work. It's a work. Get over it. I love everyone who's been world champion. Ric Flair deserved it. Harley Race deserved it. And he mentions other people, how they deserved it. Okay. I genuinely rewound to see, did I black out? Did I have a moment where my brain just shut down for a time period there? Because those two phrases totally contradicted each other. Because Tony Schiavone is talking about how I can't understand why these people think that the world championship is actually something. It's a story. It's just a work. And then say Ric Flair deserves it. Harley Race deserved it. Dusty Rhodes, I don't know if he said Dusty Rhodes, but Dusty Rhodes deserved it. Well, why did they deserve it, Tony? And if you can stop and think, you smarmy little heel, and if you can stop and think about that, and obviously the thought is in your head because you're the one that said it. Again, unless you have some kind of script in front of you, then you got to find better writers. Because the thought crossed or went through your head, the sentiment went through your head that Ric Flair deserved it. Harley Race deserved it. These people deserved it. Well, why did they deserve it? And Mr. Schiavone, if you can figure out why Ric Flair deserved it, why Harley Race deserved it, why Dusty Rhodes deserved it, why these people deserved it, then maybe you can understand why wrestling fans and wrestling purists say David Arquette did not deserve it. It's the same reason why people say Roman Reigns doesn't deserve it, because they feel he doesn't deserve it. And even if you take that verbiage, Tony Schiavone, if you take that verbiage, they don't deserve it. We're not saying that they didn't win it, that they were given it. Like it, we're not treating it like a competitive championship when we say the words, he doesn't deserve it, or he shouldn't be world champion. We're not saying he shouldn't be world champion, but he is because he cheated, or because his daddy bought him, or I don't know. Like, it baffles me when, like, so many people have echoed that it's a work, it's a work, it's a work. And you know what? Everybody is allowed their opinion, and that's what basically this podcast is built on, is opinions. But in my opinion, Tony Schiavone just had a brain fart, because I rewound and I listened to it, and unless they edited it, maybe they edited it, maybe it's a great edit, but it goes from it's a work, it's a work, it's a work, get over it, it's a work. I love everyone that's been world champion. Ric Flair deserved it. Harley Race deserved it. Well, if you understand how they deserve it, then you should understand why people feel David Arquette did not deserve it, why Roman Reigns doesn't deserve it, why Jinder Mahal doesn't deserve it. Like this, and me, I like Roman Reigns, I like Jinder Mahal, but I can see Roman Reigns being world champion. I still have a little problem with Jinder Mahal being world champion, but you know, he's not that far off the spectrum. This whole thing, this whole rant, this whole problem that I have is with Tony Schiavone. Like, how can he have two differing opinions almost literally in the same gust of oxygen? I would seriously like to know. And maybe, just maybe, he can explain that to us at some point. I'll talk to y'all when I get the chance. Bye now.